I will move around to the left to give you a better angle.
Thanks, Fib. I just needed to get another angle of that collision damage. Oh, hey there. Welcome to the Nerdy Photographer Podcast. I'm your host, Casey Fatchett. If you've listened to the show before, you know the deal. If you've never listened to the show before, welcome. In addition to providing entertaining and informative photography-related information, I also go on adventures with the crew of the Starship Fibonacci. At the moment, I'm taking photos of damaged spaceships at the spaceport for some insurance claims. Ah, the spaceport, where ships are built, docked, and repaired. Speaking of building spaceships, our guest today is world's okayest photographer, Mike Guinto, whose real-life job is photographing spacecraft being built for NASA. Now that's a nerdy photographer. We talk about the technical challenges surrounding the job as well as projects Mike is really excited about. And we just nerd out over photography in general. All that after the break. Hey, Fib, where were you built?
I'm a sentient spaceship. Who says that I was built?
Are you ready to take your photography business to new heights? Look no further than PicTime, the ultimate solution for photographers who demand more. Wow your clients with stunning branded galleries that showcase your work like never before. Let your customers preview selected photos on an array of printed goods. PicTime's smart photo store ensures your art shines on everything from canvases to coffee mugs. And take the stress out of marketing with PicTime's automation tools that empower you to effortlessly connect with clients, leaving you more time to focus on your craft. And revolutionize your workflow with PicTime's cutting-edge AI tool that allows you to search and sort images effortlessly, saving you time and ensuring you find that perfect shot in seconds. And that helps you strengthen vendor relationships with precision, curate vendor galleries, setting them just the right images, and enhancing your professional connections. Worried about switching hosts? Fear not. The expert staff at PicTime can seamlessly migrate your photos, making the transition smooth and stress-free. So are you ready to transform your photography experience? Visit nerdyphotographer.com/recommends/PicTime today and discover a world where creativity meets efficiency. Hello, and welcome to the Nerdy Photographer Podcast. I'm your host, Casey Fatchett. I'm here today with Mike Guinto, who is a photographer for NASA, which I think, qualifies you possibly as the nerdiest photographer who's ever been on the Nerdy Photographer. But before we get into that discussion, we're going to do the dice breaker. And as a special treat, folks, Mike has his own collection of dice, so he's going to roll for himself. So, Mike, welcome.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Casey. So is it a D20?
Yes, it's a 20-sided.
Okay. Cool. All right. That's a 12.
12. Okay. Which fictional character would you like to be friends with?
Oh man, that's a cool question. There are so many.
Top three.
Right off the head. Peter Parker, because photographer and super smart science stuff. Gotta love that. Aang from Avatar: The Last Airbender. That'd be pretty sweet. And then let's see. I don't know. I'm blanking. I'm drawing a blank right now.
Yeah, I think you're good with those two.
Yeah.
Not noticing a comic book thing in an anime. Okay, we're this is also seeming to be like, as we continue to talk, and we were talking before we got in here, like I think this was meant to be. You're meant to be on the show. The vibes are immaculate, as the kids say. So yeah,
I can't believe I did not know about your podcast before.
It was kismet. It was just meant to be. Like I saw your Instagram, I believe it was world's okayest photographer, which I also have to say is one of the best handles I've ever seen. And I was like, oh, this is awesome. What does this guy do? Oh, crap. I was like, he takes pictures of spaceships, basically. So yeah, you work for NASA. How did that happen? How did you?
That's a great question. I still ask myself that sometimes. It's a bit of luck and timing, being in the right place at the right time. It's also, to quote one of my photography instructors from a while back, you got to make your own luck. So to kind of give you a spiel of how I got started, my photography career actually began in the military. I enlisted in the Marine Corps and signed my name on the contract, went through all the hoops, was about to ship out to boot camp when my recruiter was like, hey, you need to pick a specialty, an MOS, it's called, and gave me a list, said, these are the things you're qualified for. And I'm looking through this big list. And as I'm scrolling through, I'd see media, like, what is that? And he says, oh, you take pictures and stuff. I'm like, that's what I want to do. That sounds really cool. So I was an enlisted photographer in the Marine Corps for 4.5 years. Got to do a whole lot of crazy stuff, see a whole lot of crazy things, tour the country pretty much. Followed the Marine Corps band, followed the Silent Drill Platoon, did a lot of work with them. The Marine Corps Trials, which is like the Wounded Warrior games specific to Marine Corps. And I also was selected to be the photographer for Medal of Honor recipient Kyle Carpenter. If you haven't heard their story, I would highly suggest Googling it. It's an amazing person, incredible story. Anyway, so after the military, I got out. I went back to school, GI Bill, got my MFA from RIT, Rochester Institute of Technology, in photography, because
you already had the experience.
So I kept going with it, right?
Yeah.
And after I graduated, I was working at RIT. There's a college within it called the National Technical Institute for the Deaf. I was essentially in the marketing department as the photographer for that college. But all the while, I was looking to come back to the DC area. That's where I was stationed in Quantico, and then up at the Pentagon in Arlington while I was in the military. And then, so I fell in love with like the DC DMV area, and met my wife there as well. And so while I was working up in New York, I was just kind of searching for jobs in the area, what would, see what was there, what was available. And after about, I want to say like 8 months of just kind of like passively searching, I saw this very nondescript government job for a contracting company, and it didn't even say NASA or anything.
I'm not going to tell you. Yeah, I got to tell you, as someone who I am qualified as a government contractor, none of those jobs ever say who it's actually for.
Right. And so I applied, not thinking much of it. And then I got a phone call interview. And when I did that, they had mentioned, oh, this is for NASA Goddard Space Flight Center. And awesome. My jaw just like dropped. I sat up a little straighter in my chair. It was a phone interview, but I sat up straighter in my chair, and I was just like, okay, we're going to take this seriously now. So ended up getting the second interview. And my room behind me at the time, living up in New York, it was the work from home office, had it all set up. And behind me, not staged at all, I swear, but I had my telescope. I had a giant book of Hubble images right here. You can see that. And then a whole bunch of other just random things on my bookshelf. But fortunately, I was selected. And so I've been a technical photographer at NASA Goddard Space Flight Center for the last 3 years now.
That's awesome, man. It is something that I commonly say to people, that the jobs come not necessarily when you're looking for them. Like, and this is something that is like a lot of photographers are freelance, but this is something you like an in-house job. Is what I would refer to it as, like as a photographer. And those sorts of gigs don't come along often, because usually they get somebody they like in there, and they're like, we're going to keep you because we like you. So that's really amazing, and congratulations on that. That's awesome. So what is the process of photo? I mean, I'm gonna use the word spacecraft just because I'm sure it's a lot of different things, but like, what is the process like for photographing a spacecraft? What are the technical and logistical challenges that you face as a photographer?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there is a lot of work to do. Basically, we are embedded with a certain project. So right now, I am focusing on. We have a small team of photographers at Goddard, and we all kind of have divvied out and basically been embedded in various projects on center, and we help each other out and crisscross as needed as schedules require and whatnot. But we try to be the primaries on
stick to a
projects.
Particular project.
Right now I am working on the on-orbit servicing assembly and manufacturing mission. And I am starting to transition over to Da Vinci, which is a science probe that is going to do flybys and then actually dive down into the atmosphere of Venus and collecting a whole bunch of crazy science data for that, which is a really cool project. I'm excited to get more into that. But to answer your question, basically we from the beginning of where all the hardware starts coming in, NASA doesn't just build one thing and blast it off into space. They have a engineering design unit, or sometimes called like an experimental test unit, and they build that. They work out all the kinks and stuff as they're building it, because these are one of a kind, never been done before things, right? And so every step of that process as they are building it, you're taking photos and documenting how it's being built, the configurations, the test results. Every step of the way is being documented, and then you are taking all of that information at the end of every day, and you are putting it into a database that is accessible and digestible, and then you are giving context to all of that imagery, because 20 years from now, someone needs to be able to see those images and know exactly what's happening.
They go into the archive and be like, hey, especially if you have a long-term probe that's going out or something, they're like, oh yeah, we need to go back and like look at. One of the things that always amazes me, and I don't know, this is actually something that's relevant, but it's when they're like, oh, we've got to like fix something on board a probe that's like, and I'm like, fix? And it's like, are you just turning it off and turning it back on again? Like, what are you like fixing? Like, what the amount of being able to like repair something like in space it is kind of incredible.
It is incredible the amount of attention, even like a single screw is given, right? The amount of scrutiny, something like that is even given. Everything from the weight, the material, and how many times can this thing be screwed in and unscrewed before it's no longer up to par, up to the quality that we need for spaceflight, because spaceflight is very demanding. So the testing is very demanding, and we are following it from the initial, the very first thing that gets glued onto a circuit board or soldered onto a circuit board, all the way to launch. And we follow it every step of the way. And so we have the technical photographers, we have this very unique experience where not only do we have this kind of like broad, we have to get this broad understanding of what the project is, but we see every step of the way, and are there to document every little bit all the way up.
Every part of it. That's incredible. And like the like childhood me is like, well, adult me is super jealous. It's just sort of like, that And there's a part of my brain that is scratching that is just like is awesome.
Yeah.
So from a and that's all totally makes sense. Like that it's going into a database every day, like creating, like you were saying, like having context around the images so that people can come back to that archive later on and see everything. But what is it like as a photographer? I'm sure that there are clean rooms and other conditions that are very controlled and very specific. How does that affect your approach to doing photography?
Yeah. So, first of all, um, you have to get all the training to be able to go into a clean room, to be able to work with all the ESD, all the electrostatic discharge, all the equipment there is very electrically sensitive, so you have to have training for that. All the different spaces. Then on top of that, it's what can you bring in to that clean room, and every build, every spacecraft is different. Sometimes you go into a room and they say, hey, no radio transmitted in here, and so now you got to think, okay, is my flash radio or is it IR? Can I switch, or do I need to use a standard
A sync port,
continuous lighting source, or sync cord, right? And so also, what kind of gear can I bring in? Anything you bring into the clean room has to be properly cleaned. We have a whole team of contamination control engineers and technicians who will wipe down, scrub everything with isopropyl alcohol. They'll blow dry it, put it through all the stops, bag it up, and then pass it to you in the clean room.
So you have the cleanest equipment of any photographer in the world.
Yeah, and it's cleaned every single time you go in. And so if you look at my camera, a lot of the paint on the corners especially has begun to wear down, and you see the metal shining through
over time. Just like we have cleaned it so much that we have worn away the entire coating.
Right. And so that actually also affects, if you have any, a lot of the lenses that we photograph with, they have all these special coatings.
Right.
And if you're wiping that out with like straight IPA every single, multiple times a day, might be handy to have a filter on,
right?
Or so it's a lot of kind of planning out and thinking about all these different things, because every day is something different. And you really have to, that's the benefit of being embedded with the team, is because you really get to understand what this specific project needs.
Right. And things like, I'm going to keep that UV filter on there just to make sure that you're not, wiping the coating in my lens
maybe
away.
Later today, you are shooting a blacklight inspection. And so a UV filter is not good, because now you can't see the reflectance.
Exactly. Like there's all of the variables that go into play. Yeah. Again, like my brain is just a flood of like, oh, this is like awesome problems to try to figure out, and how amazing.
I think that is one of the best parts about it, is because it is constantly a game of problem solving. And if that is kind of like something that scratches the itch in your brain, then it's very satisfying.
Yeah. So, okay, like here's a we're going to go away from the, what do you think is the most exciting or so far awe-inspiring mission or craft that you've had a chance to photograph, like as a project, and why does it stand out to you?
Oh my goodness. Okay. So I am going to say the Pace spacecraft, which just launched at the beginning of this year, I believe, like February. It is the Plankton Aerosol Cloud Ocean Ecosystem Observatory spacecraft. Basically, it's a satellite looking at Earth, specifically the oceans. And I think the thing that was so exciting for it, one, the photos coming back from it, you can Google them and look it up. Pace has their own website. One, they're absolutely stunning. But one of the problems they had to solve on this project is, how do we photograph? What they're doing is they're looking at the color of plankton on the coastlines of the ocean, and from the color, they are able to determine like what kinds of plankton and how much plankton is there, and this gives them a whole host of information of the ocean, right?
Yeah, about the ecosystem and how it's doing.
Yes, but in order to do that, you need perfect white balance, like perfect white balance. And so, how do you do that? So there is a sub-assembly on this thing that is looking at the sun and measuring the light, the color temperature coming from that, and then also they have to fly it in a way that you are not getting a glare off the ocean, because where you're positioned with the sun and the ocean, that glare is kind of an issue.
It's going to affect how you read the white balance.
So it was kind of like building this massive, highly specialized camera that is now taking photos in space, and a hyperspectral camera photographing UV, IR, the whole spectrum, and it was just so cool to be able to see all of it come together, and then get to see it launch. And that was the first project I got to see launch as well. So I think it'll always hold a special place in my heart.
That's awesome, man. Like I can imagine the sense of accomplishment, like as it after a successful launch, and like seeing it like go off. Like my father-in-law used to work for United Space Alliance, like putting things together for NASA, like on the shuttles and stuff. And
I was going to say, so did he do like the Hubble repair shuttles and all of that? Or?
I'd have to ask him, but it was just like like going. He's got all these plaques of each mission and everything, going out, and it's in discussions that we've had, just like going to watch a mission that you worked on, like launch, is just such a feeling of completion and accomplishment, even though it's going to keep going once it's left, but it's just the sense of a supreme sense of satisfaction and completion. Like that
it really is, and like there is that whole the launch week, all the launch preparations you do, and then in the back of your mind, you're just thinking, we are strapping this thing we just spent 4 years building and testing, and strapping it on top of a whole bunch of explosives,
right?
And there's just so much that needs to go right, so when it does, and it is successful, and it turns on while in space, it's just such a satisfying feeling.
It actually is rocket science.
It really is. Yeah.
So
fortunately, I don't have to know the rocket science, so
So, okay, we're going to get world's okayest photographer.
Yeah.
Where did that come from? What, I mean, obviously I have a pretty good sense of humor. I have a sense of it, but like for you, like what was the decision-making process on going in that direction? So
it was a moniker that was actually bestowed to me.
Nice.
So when I was working at the Pentagon, I had just come off the media tour with Kyle Carpenter, Medal of Honor recipient, and we had this whole. So the combat camera shops in the Marine Corps, they consist of a photo department, a video department, and graphics department. In every duty station is different, but in our shop, we had probably 5 to 8 Marines in each section. And then a whole host of civilian counterparts and other people just working in the shop. But one of my photos got printed up by the graphics department real big and hung in the lobby. And it was kind of like a little chip on my shoulder. It felt good. But also, it's the military. We have to give each other crap. And so one of the video Marines who Tammy Heinlein, who's also a fantastic photographer, videographer, writer, producer. She wears many hats now, but she handed me a little ribbon that she made up with a little with world's okayest photographer, a little bronze star in it.
Nice.
and she just kind of like pinned that to me. So I have continued to use it as a reminder to stay humble and not take yourself too seriously.
Yeah, I think I can see that. It's just, I think that it's one of those things where people will ask me, like, like to compare myself to another photographer in some way, like when they're like trying to hire me for a job, and I'm like, I can't.
Yeah, no,
I can't.
yeah.
We're all good, or we're all like, like there's a level of like, I know I'm good at what I do, but also that person is good at what they do, but we do different things.
Right.
And just like that sense of like trying to stay humble and being like, I know my niche. I know what I'm good at. I know what somebody else is good at. And like the sort of like, yeah, being humble in that sense of like confident, but also knowing like there are things that I can't do. And I don't know that I could do your job. Like, it's just like, I mean, even from with the training, it's just like understanding that you don't know everything, and you can't just like pick up somebody else's gig. And it's something that I see a lot of people who are like, oh yeah, I mean, whatever, I can do that. And like, that's not that hard. I'm like, hell, I don't know. Like I'm the older I get and the more often I'm like, I look at stuff and go, you know what? That's not for me. Like that is just not in, something that I could be as creative at or as technically good or whatever the thing may be. It's like, I could probably do it for years and not be as good as someone who has been doing it. Like it's
I agree with you 100%. I've done a season of wedding photography, and all the power to you. Like that is it is not an easy gig. It's tough work. I had a lot of fun doing it, but it is very tough work.
It's demanding physically and mentally, and it's always the thing that makes me laugh the most when I'll get some comment or a message from somebody like, you're a wedding photographer, you're not a real photographer. And I'm just like, buddy, come and photograph a wedding.
What does that even
mean? What do you like? You're doing portraits, you're doing, candids, you're doing event photography.
Say that stuff all the time. Like you see on threads or whatever, like, oh, you're not a real photographer unless you do this. It's you could go back so you could play that to its most extreme and it just becomes ridiculous, right?
Yeah. And it's like anybody who says, it's like anyone who says like there are absolutes in anything. Like you have to do this or you can't do that. Like anybody who says it's going to be an absolute right there. Like
only a Sith
deals in absolutes. Exactly. I think that there's some sort of wanting to be right for people who say those sorts of things. They want to be.
That's what it is, right? I think people are trying to. It's fuel or feed for their ego to show how they're better. I think
they're trying to elevate their own position or get the high ground, if you may.
Right.
Is another way of saying that. So outside of your job as a photographer for NASA, you also are taking pictures, but I've noticed that a lot of the stuff that you share on social media, a lot of it shot on film.
Mm-hmm.
What made you make the decision to like shoot film in your spare time?
Yeah. So, well, one, it's fun. It's fun. It breaks it up. I am shooting digital at work.
Right.
I'm shooting. I think last year I shot like 60,000 photos in a typical 40-hour work week. Like that's
a lot.
It's a lot. Yeah. And so I've come into positions into photo jobs where the former photographer was just burnt out. And they had been doing it for 40, 50 years and they were burnt out and they said, I don't want to photograph anymore. I'm going to retire and that's it. I'm done. And I don't want that. I genuinely enjoy, I love taking photos. I love talking about photography. And I wanted a way to keep a personal practice that felt distinctly different than my day-to-day work. And I think shooting film has done that. But it's also, it becomes a process. It gives you something to do with your hands. At the end of the day, you have something tangible. Like I've been thinking a lot recently about, why film? If you're going to do it, why shoot it? And I've really enjoyed the process, and that sounds very cliche. If you ever ask a photographer, why do you do it? I enjoy the process, but like there is something about it. There is something about being able to go from take a photo with a camera, develop the negatives yourself, be able to make a print yourself from that negative, and that printing in a darkroom is an art all in of itself, but also I think it gives me I truly believe that it does give me a better understanding and a better I think it improves even my digital work.
Oh, I'm sure.
Because you are constantly thinking about things you don't normally have to think about. And so I see it, one, as a way to help train, but more so just to keep the creativity flowing, because there's only so many hours of taking photos of circuit boards that you can take before you realize, the job can be boring sometimes. There are some boring days, but this I think helps me keep a broad appreciation, because photography is so much bigger than any one genre. It's so big.
You bring up two things there that really strike me. First of all, we'll start with the process thing you mentioned, and I always hear people going like, "Oh, it's all about the process," and I'm like, "Well, what about the process?" Because I started out shooting film. I've really gotten into it a lot more again in the last year, and sort of like rounding out my I had a bunch of old film cameras, and some of which I didn't know if they worked or not. So I was like buying film and like shooting with them to see if they worked. And for me, I understand what changes about the process for me, but I always ask other people, like, what is it about? And you explained your own thing, but it's like, for some people it's different. It's they really think about the composition a lot more. Like you did, like it slows things down, and you're thinking, not like, oh, I can take like 15 pictures of this and I'll get one and I can crop it later and whatever, and digitally, or I can just shoot I can shoot 150 pictures of this one thing, as opposed to I've got 10 or 12 or 24 or 36 exposures, and that's it for this roll. I can't change the film speed. I can't, like, I've only got so much, my shutter speed. And this is the one thing that always gets me, like when the trend of like blurry photos was going around for a while, I was like, do you guys understand why the photos that you're being nostalgic for in the past, why they were out of focus? And they're just like, oh no, just no, you're just throwing your focus like completely, so like the whole picture is just blurry. It's you couldn't get a low enough aperture to let in enough light for something, so you had to and you only usually have up to 1,000th maybe of a second on your shutter speed. You can't open it up, or you can't
that's huge, right? Because like digital cameras nowadays, you can go f 1.8 to 22 and you get everything from 30-second exposure to 1/8,000th of a second,
right?
Like when you picked your lens with it. So I was just shooting this weekend at and I had a 4x5 and I had my Mamiya RB67, and the shutter speeds on those lenses are not changing.
No.
You have that many stops and those are your options.
Right. Yeah. And it's just like, and like trying to explain that to people, like, hey, you can't change your film speed. You have limited settings, and you're focusing manually.
Right.
Like, especially if something's moving, like it's hard to like manually focus on stuff. And that's why these past photos had blur to them a lot of them or whatever. Like, so that, like, if you want to emulate that, you have to think about and be intentional about those things, like limit yourself on, your aperture or your film speed or whatever, and that sort of stuff. And then you will find yourself creating images look like that aren't just like, I'm just going to not focus on anything.
Yeah.
And but limitations.
I was going to say, if I can say, like, that idea of limitations, I think is so important to photography, because photography really, for me, photography really is an art form that creates out of limitation. And by that, I mean, like, even the act of pointing your camera at something, you are framing something in there, but you are also choosing what to leave out. Right.
Yeah.
And so you are creating through subtraction. You are cutting this thing out of life. Right. This little frame. So from the process of taking the photos all the way through, it is about working within limits. And I think there is a lot of potential for creativity with that. And I think that's something that is, if not unique to photography, it's something that's really special about it.
Yeah. I think that one of the things that can help you learn the most about yourself in the creative process and help you expand is, like, even if you're shooting digital, you can limit yourself. Yeah. You can say, I'm only going to go out today and, like, I'm going to shoot with one lens. I'm going to shoot at this film speed. I'm only going to take 36 pictures total, 36 exposures. Not like I'm going to choose which ones. And, like, and I tell people, like, this is how you, by doing this, you're going to think a lot more about what you're doing, and you're going to think creatively about telling the story that you want to tell with your photo and your image, and thinking about, like you said, what am I going to leave out? What am I putting in there? How am I composing this? You think about those things when you limit yourself, and you're like, okay, now I actually have to be creative. I can't just let the camera do a thing, and then I'm going to come back to it later, and I'm going to edit it a certain way, and I'm going to, like, crop and whatever. And those things are fine. But I think that you end up getting a lot more right in the camera.
Yeah. Yeah. You need to. It's a lot less forgiving in film too, I think. Yeah.
But you can do it, like I'm saying, you can do it with digital as well. Like some of those things, like,
oh yeah, absolutely.
To help yourself become more creative. The other thing you mentioned was finding something that you enjoy photographing personally that isn't your job.
Yes.
Even for professional photographers, like I recommend everybody photograph something that you're not monetizing.
Right.
That you're just doing for yourself.
You started it. You probably, I'm going to take a bet and say you didn't start it because you wanted to be rich. So you wanted to do it because it was fun.
Right.
And so keep making it fun. Keep enjoying what you're doing.
Yeah, because otherwise you just, like you said, you get burnt out, and you don't want to do this stuff anymore. And I'm curious, since I mean, again, I've been looking through your social stuff, like the stuff you share, a lot of the natural world stuff in there. So I'm curious, is that a response again to being, like, very technical at work?
Man, yeah, that's a good question. I think there is possibly an element of that. I think the other reason I have been drawn to a lot of the natural world is because when I started this job, I moved to a new state. So I'm living in Maryland now, and it is kind of like my way or my excuse to go explore the new area around me. So it helps me, go find all the new parks to hike at, and so it's photography has always been for me a way or an excuse or a key to different aspects of life that I wouldn't otherwise normally bump into. So
exploration.
Yeah, exactly.
Both of space and the natural and on world. Earth. Here on Earth, here on this planet. Awesome. Okay, so speaking of space exploration, that is an inherently forward-thinking and futuristic field. So how do you see photography playing a role in documenting space missions going forward, especially with things like AI, advanced imaging technology, things of that sort. I have my own personal thoughts on AI, but I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
I think I will say I don't think photography is in danger of AI. I think there. Let me qualify that. I think there are certain jobs that may end up getting taken over by AI. Things like advertising, stuff like that. And I'm not saying it will get taken over, but
it's going to become less prevalent.
Going to eat into that market, right? Yeah. It's going to be a lot harder. But documentary, things that are photographing the real, not necessarily photojournalism, things like that, and technical photography. My photos of the configuration of this piece of flight hardware, you can't make that in AI, and it would be useless for the testing requirements that they do, right? Yeah. You need to see how it actually is, not how a computer expects it to look like.
Right. And I have lots of thoughts on AI, and this something is a topic I had recently seen in somebody's video. Yeah. And I think it's a topic for another episode entirely in and of itself, which is the necessity of realness from photography. Right. We have a certain need. There used to be an expectation. Mm-hmm. I think that is because of retouching and a lot of mainstream media stuff, like advertising or film or, magazines, things like that. We have gotten less of an expectation for reality in those particular spheres. Yeah. Because we know that things are going to get retouched or whatever, and it's not necessarily going to be the original image. But there is a need for reality, especially in certain fields. And your episode will come after this. I was talking to Rob Tyrrell from Leica, and he was saying how certain camera companies are coding it into the camera, AI proofing things and saying this is what this is the original unedited image, and this is what it looks like it's in the code for the image, and it says this is what the original image looks like, so that that there will be a way to authenticate an original image.
I would be really interested in the specifics of how that would work, because I think that is something that's there is definitely that need. I agree, and I think there's also a desire for it, and you hear people talk about how people want authenticity, and people are really looking for that. And I think that's actually why I started posting. Whenever I post a film photo, I always post the negative right next to it, and that is kind of in directly because of this idea, right?
This is actually the photo I took, and I didn't
right. And that's it. It's actually the photo I took. Also, you can tell if I edited it, right? You can see the dodge and burns. You can see if I cropped. You can see. I don't personally like to do this ever, but if I clone stamped or heel brushed or anything in the digital scan, right? And having that physical artifact of the negative is very difficult to reproduce digitally. So I'm very curious how Leica would plan to do that.
Yeah, I guess what he had told me that they have it available, I believe, in these new models that have just recently come out. I have to go back and double check that, but it's an available technology. But he's saying that other camera companies are also they're on it too, and it's in their best interests, honestly, to have that sort of technology and coding in the image to say this is the original image. This is what was originally came out of the camera. Mm-hmm. And so that, otherwise there's, photography becomes again, not there is no value in it if we cannot say that this is what is real. This is what was actually captured. And there's Canon has done this thing, I think, in the R1 that really upset me. I was that this became a feature. It was oh, we're using AI in the camera to be able to boost the resolution of the image, like double the resolution of an image in the camera. And I'm like, once you let that sort of technology into your camera, you're kind of like making,
right.
so it's much like the reason, like people are like, there are court cases that say that phone photography can't be used as evidence because there is so much going on that it is technically not a photograph.
Oh, yeah.
Because there are so many like filters and processing that goes on
right
inside, like just by touching the button, that there's so much going on that it is not a real image.
This is a discussion that like needs to be had, I think, on a very broad scale. I think
we should dedicate another episode to this. First of all,
honestly, a whole series.
Yeah, like, we should get like a panel. Series. We should get a panel of people together to talk about it. All right, well, let's do that. I'll start working on that. I think it's important. I think it's a really.
It really is, and honestly, like photos have began being doctored like since the beginning.
Oh yeah,
right?
Yes.
If not just taken out of context and presented, but actually, one of my favorite anecdotes is Arthur Conan Doyle, the author to
Sherlock Holmes.
Sherlock Holmes was like fully convinced fairies existed because these two sisters were like,
this is in the spiritualism
patching negatives of each other.
Yes.
On top of each other in the dark room.
Oh, my friend, there's an episode of The Nerdy Photographer.
Oh, I'm gonna look
all about this. There's a Halloween episode a few years back. I will send you the link where we talked about the spiritualism craze and like spirit photography, and how there was a very famous guy who was like a spirit photographer who would say like, oh, like we have a spirit with us, and he would just like take another plate,
right,
and like put it next to like their, so that when he printed it out, it looks like there's a person standing behind them, and he got caught because the person recognized like who the spirit was, and it was not who he was. Like, no, wait, that's my cousin. Like, that's actually my cousin in that photo. And he was like, what? Like, oh, maybe your cousin is trying to speak to you. And he's like, he's alive. I know he's alive. Like, okay. But yeah, there's we delved into that. I went into there's just
there's a constant back and forth with the technology, right? And I apologize if you hear my dogs barking. But there's a constant back and forth where like technology leaps ahead, and then like we have to, as a society, we have to find a way to make it possible, right? Like you could doctor a photo, but you still had the negative.
Right
now, you can. It's very easy, and it's. Almost anyone could do it now. Like the learning curve for it is so much lower because, like you said, you can do it on your phone.
The bar has been lowered.
It's been lowered so much, which honestly is great. The more people taking photos and learning about photography, the better, I think. But we need to have a way to, for lack of a better word, certify that authenticity. Right?
To authenticate it.
Yes. That's a better word.
Yeah, I mean, to authenticate the image, and like this is what was originally created.
Yes,
and I think that there's, I think that the whole having a series about this is a great idea, and then I'm already written that down. Like I'm planning to, we'll see who to get on there. If you have any ideas on who I should have on that list, I'll ask around as well to like.
I couldn't tell you any specifics, but like, I'd love to see like a photojournalist's perspective on it.
Yeah, I think like, that, and
their job is all about that factualness,
the realness
of it, right?
Yeah, so, the realness of it.
But there's a lot of different parties, I think, that would have a stake, and I'm sure there's got to be something happening.
Well, and I feel like there's got to be a backlash as well, like at some point. And, I've seen it recently. Like I've always been, as a wedding photographer, my whole thing was I want your authentic self shown here. I'm not over retouching anything. I am doing my best to bring out your personality, making you feel comfortable so that, that shows in the photos. And so this authenticity train that is like started rolling recently, I'm like, great, this is what I do. This is like my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
But then I'm like, see, at the same time, there's like, you'll see people like taking their picture and running it through AI and like having like all of these, like, I'm creating like 30 headshots of myself that, posting on Facebook. And I'm like, I know that's not you. Like,
Right.
I know that's not you. Um, that I'm like, at the same time, you're like talking about like wanting authenticity. There's like, and I'm waiting for like to see if the scale like tips
Hmm.
to a point where people are like, you know what? I actually want to see the real thing. I want to see
And
what's actually
that's
going on here.
I suspect like the if I could put on my art history hat real quick, I feel like the emergence of AI is a lot of what's fueling. I think this push for film photography is the reaction to the
Oh yeah.
emergence of AI.
Well, and then there's an interesting thing. I don't know if you caught it. I had posted about this earlier in the year. There was a whole article on like how people are not picking up their negatives. Like most of the
I
people,
did that blew my mind.
most of the people, like 90% of the people who are shooting film are not picking up the negatives. They're just getting the scans back.
Yeah.
Like, cause they want to post I did like a impromptu, like little poll of people like, do you pick up your negatives? If not, why? And it was like, oh yeah, I'm just going for the look. And like, I love the process. This was another reason I like the people saying only saying the process and why I ask further questions about it kind of
That
like
makes a lot more sense.
makes me
Okay.
like kind of go, raises my alert level like a little bit higher. Is like, if you can't like talk about what about the process you like, then I'm skeptical.
Yeah.
Because they're just going for a certain aesthetic.
Yeah.
And like, oh, it's not just that, it's the like, I'm just going to use a disposable film camera because I can't see whatever. And I'm like, now you're getting into sort of the land of I don't know, posers, like
I have so many questions. Like what is if it's just aesthetic, like I don't know. I guess I don't have questions. I'm confounded. I don't understand, but I want to understand why, because if it personally, I don't see much of a difference if you're not going to have the negatives and have the ability to print from them. If
What's
it's
the
only
point?
going to exist digitally, then why not start digitally?
Right. What's the point? What's the point of
Like if you're not developing,
right?
how much of the process are you really involved in?
Right. Or like okay, I'm going to get real into my physics background here and into some emotional content of film photography, which is for me part of the value emotionally for an image is that the photons that bounced off that subject went through that film and caused a reaction, and some of that energy of my subject is in that photo.
Literally the light reflected off that person and is now on it is, and then immediately hit this emulsion, like this physical negative is a representation. It was in the room with that person. And especially I have a photo hanging on my fridge of my grandfather who passed a few years ago. And every time I look at it, I just think, how amazing is it that we can have something like this, right?
Yeah.
300 years ago, people were like, oh man, like we have this painting.
Yeah.
If you were wealthy enough, we have this painting of this person, right?
It cost us an arm and a leg.
Yeah. They didn't quite get the nose right.
Yeah. It just, and yeah, it's just, there's something so for me, like such an emotional quality to film photography in that sense. And of having the negative, and like I have those negatives and I'm just like, the negative means so much to me because it's like, it was touched by this person's energy or whatever's energy, and just like having that there. And in some ways, indigenous cultures were correct. We are stealing your energy and taking a photo, and like, we're taking a portion of it. But it's just whatever bounced off of you. It's not like
it is an ephemera. It's like it is it anything actually objectively scientifically measurable or there? No, but there is something about that, like knowing. There's something about knowing that.
Exactly. It is that feeling of I'm sure there will be people who be like, whoa, whatever, man. But
there was a great Radio Lab episode podcast, if I can.
Yeah, sure.
I love that podcast. NPR Radio Lab, science nerdy questions all the time. Fantastic. But they did a great episode about like ephemera, essentially, and they had a very similar discussion. It was great. I'll have to find it and send you the link.
And I think that it's one of those things that, I don't know, like you said, like people who have passed and having that sort of memory of them, and I don't know. It's just
it's something you appreciate.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, even if you only have a digital photograph, like it's fantastic. But like looking back through childhood photos, or like my grandparents' family photos from when my grandma was a kid, like they still have this stuff.
Yeah.
And they're unboxing it, it's crazy.
It's so stuff that I went through, like after my parents passed away, like I was going through their photos and like seeing photos I had never seen before of family members I had never like seen before. And like just having this like reaction, like a very visceral reaction to seeing these things. I'm like, I've never seen this person, and now I am seeing them, and like feeling like I am in some way like communing with their energy by like having this like photo in front of me. And it's and I always, you've mentioned it, like in printing from the negative and having that ability. And I always tell people, like, print your photos, print out photos, whatever, like shooting digital, shooting film, whatever it is, print out some photos, have those there, because you know what, in 100 years, like nobody's going on your hard drive. Nobody's going into your cloud account to see. In 100
years, your hard drive is going to be kaput.
Right. There's no way to, there's no saving that stuff. You're future proofing the only way to future proof your images is by printing them out. And I think that Dimitri Mack said it very well. Also, it's kind of what one of the quotes I focused on his from when he was on the show was that you don't know how somebody's going to respond to an image that you took unless you show it to them.
Yeah, that was a good episode. I like that.
It's I mean, it's that sort of like feeling of like, I think we all commonly have this sort of, as photographers, a lot of time we're like looking at it and it's us in our image, and we don't think about, other people might have a different reaction to this than I have to it. I wonder what that would be. But I also think of like Vivian Mayer and how she didn't want people to see her photos, and she commonly didn't see her photos. Like,
and now she is like the patron saint of street photography.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, her photography is amazing. It blows my mind. But yeah, it's just like, how do you know until people see it? Other people see it, and like, and what kind of an effect?
I have fully committed to the fact that I am a horrible judge of which of my photos are great, because every time I put them out there, the ones I think are going to be awesome get the least amount of reception, and the ones I'm like, whatever, sure, it's a nice photo, end up getting like,
well, things resonate.
A lot of reaction.
Things resonate differently with people.
Right.
I think that it's interesting. Like sometimes a photo that I've taken that I think that people will react to, same sort of thing, but like I think that they'll like it for a particular reason.
Yeah.
But they see something totally different in it than I do, or that I did when I was taking the picture, and I'm like, oh, this is why people are gonna love this because of X, and they're like, no, it's Y and Z that we really like, and I'm like, interesting. And it's the subjectivity of of
Right.
art. But
also with your own art, you may spend so much time on a single image, like planning it out and taking it and like making it just look just so. And like, when you put it out into the public, 90%, 99% of the people out there aren't going to appreciate all of that, but they're still they're going to find something um, to react with or mesh with that photo. So,
yeah, I think
like you said, everybody's going to react differently. You never know.
Are you ready to take your website design to the next level? Look no further than Elementor, the cutting-edge WordPress website builder designed for professionals like you. With Elementor, you have the power to create entire website themes and layouts that are as unique as your imagination. Say goodbye to rigid templates and constraints. Elementor empowers you to design custom headers, footers, pages, posts, archive pages, and even WooCommerce product pages, all from a single user-friendly platform. The best part? You don't need to be a coding wizard to use Elementor. Say farewell to the days of wrestling with complex code or being dependent on a myriad of plugins. Elementor offers you a seamless, code-free design experience that puts you in control. So why limit your creativity? Choose Elementor and unleash your website design potential. Elevate your online presence with a website that truly represents your vision and brand. Get started with Elementor today. Just go to nerdyphotographer.com/recommends/Elementor and witness the transformation of your WordPress web design experience. It's time to build an extraordinary website with ease and finesse. Don't wait. Create with Elementor. Hey there, nerds. The Nerdy Photographer has a brand new website, and with it, we've created a resources page where you can find all sorts of things to help you in your photographic journey, from contract templates to website hosting to web design services to printing. It's all in there. Be sure to go out and check out nerdyphotographer.com/resources. That's nerdyphotographer.com/resources.
Hey. And now for my favorite part of the show. What's that say? Useless information. This is always death.
Mike, did you know, and you might know this, given the project you were talking about earlier, that Venus spins backwards and no one knows why?
I did not know that.
While the rest of the planets in our solar system spin counterclockwise, Venus spins in a clockwise retrograde rotation. And while there are a few theories about it, no one can say for sure why.
That is fascinating.
Maybe you guys will figure out why.
Maybe. Who knows? I'll say it one last before we end. The Da Vinci mission is going to be so cool when it all comes together. Like, Venus is a wild place.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Sulfuric acid atmosphere.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's nuts.
And it's seriously, when I talked about how my young self was like so jealous of your job, it's like, yeah. I wanted to be an astronaut or astrophysicist. Like, that was like one of my, besides the other choice was dream career was talk show host, and then it was astronaut, astrophysicist.
Look at that.
So yeah, like I think that's I'm super excited to see where that mission goes. Yeah. Mike, thank you so much for being on the show. Where can people find you?
Thank you for having me. So you can find me on Instagram and Threads at World's Okayest Photographer.
Underscores in between those.
I believe it's periods.
Periods?
Yes. Okay. Look for the person popping an orange balloon.
Yes. It's a great photo. Really, seriously, thank you for coming on. I am really happy. You come back sometime. If you think of anything, I'll send you my ideas. We should definitely do this again sometime.
For sure. Happy to talk anytime. Thanks, Casey.
And welcome back. Many thanks to Mike Guinto for joining us on the program. As you can probably tell, I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. Go to the links in the episode notes and be sure to follow Mike. While you're adding folks on socials, you should be sure to follow along with the Nerdy Photographer on, the various social medias, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, Reddit. It's all at the Nerdy Photo, all one word, no underscores, dots, or dashes, at the Nerdy Photo. Feel free to tell us what you think about this or any other episode of the show. Leave your photography-related questions or tell us what topics you would like to hear covered on the podcast in the future. And if you want to be extra super cool, you can leave a review, but, only if you want to be extra super cool. So, Fib, about what you were saying earlier, how exactly were you made?
Well, you see, Casey, when two spaceships love each other very much.
Whoa. This is a family program. Until next time, everybody, stay safe and stay nerdy.
Who's that coming back to town? You better start listening. Who's your heart been beating about? You better listen.